You're lying still now, perhaps with the faint sound of your own breath, soft and slow in the quiet around you. Let your body sink gently into the place where you rest. Let your hands grow still, your eyes relax, and your thoughts begin to drift like slow-moving boats down a wide, ancient river. Tonight, we journey not to the pharaoh's thrones or to the endless clatter of building stone upon stone. We are not racing chariots, nor carving laws into limestone. We are simply walking slowly, at the pace of age and memory, along the banks of the Nile, with the men and women who have seen many flood seasons pass and who no longer rise to labor under the midday sun. These are the elders of ancient Egypt, those who no longer climb temple steps or dig canals, but who sit in shaded courtyards, tend small gardens, and remember. You might imagine yourself there, barefoot on warm stone, the scent of damp earth and boiled herbs hanging in the still air. Overhead, the sky is soft and pale, a veil of dust filtering the sun. Somewhere nearby, a clay cup rests in your hand, filled with sweet tea steeped from desert blossoms. A lazy breeze lifts the scent of henna and reeds. And so we begin gently, slowly, as one would begin the day when there is no rush and no more need to hurry. The old man wakes before the birds. It is not because he must, but because he always has. For decades his body has risen with the Nile wind, that first cool breath before the sun begins to climb. His eyes open without command, cloudy now, but still steady. His joints protest as they always do, not angrily, but with a creak and a sigh, like a door swinging on a familiar hinge. He sits upright on a mat of woven palm fibers. The room around him is still dim. Its walls are coated in smooth, lime-washed mud brick, the color of ash and sand. There are no decorations here, save a small painted lotus bloom above the doorway, fading now, chipped and worn like memory itself. The air is cool, faintly sweet with the smell of old herbs and last night's ashes. He pulls his linen shawl around his shoulders. It is soft from many washings, its once vivid pattern now faded to the color of faded parchment. It still warms him, though, and he wears it as he did as a younger man, slung low around the shoulders, tied at the breastbone. The knot is looser now. His fingers no longer rush. A shallow bowl beside the bed holds water from yesterday's draw. He uses a few drops to moisten his face, wiping away the sleep with calloused hands. His nails are thick with years, the knuckles broad and knotted like gnarled roots. He breathes out through his nose, not loudly, not sharply, just a long, easy breath. The beginning of another day. Through the doorway, the river breathes. He steps carefully onto the porch, if the worn strip of stone between doorway and garden could still be called a porch. It's more a threshold, really. One that opens into the world of green shoots and morning stillness. His garden is small now. He used to grow much more okra, garlic, onions in wide clay beds, but now only a patch of soft green remains. Some chickpeas, perhaps, maybe a few beans clinging to vine. A fig tree casts shade over the eastern edge, its branches reaching slightly toward the water. He lowers himself to the bench, a low slab of sandstone darkened by years of use, smoothed by the many hours he spent there watching the Nile go by. He leans back against the wall, adjusting the cloth behind his neck. There is a clay jug waiting on a low stool, not quite warm anymore, but the tea inside still carries the taste of anise and fennel. His first sip is always quiet. He lets the heat rest on his tongue, the sweetness settle along the edges of his throat. He closes his eyes and listens. A donkey brays faintly from beyond the reeds. A creaking cart will somewhere. The flutter of ibis wings overhead. This is not the Egypt of tombs and temples. This is not the Egypt of wars or taxes, scribes or generals. This is the Egypt of those who have stopped needing to remember what comes next. Here, on this narrow stretch of riverbank, the old man has nothing but his small world. His tea, his tree, and the garden he coaxes awake with gentle hands. His name is Amosi, though most now simply call him grandfather. Even those who are not related, even the children who carry bundles of reeds for the boats downriver call him so. They do not ask for stories. They simply nod to him in the morning, respectful of the way time has shaped his face, respectful of the rhythm in which he lives. A few moments more pass. He lifts the jug and pours another cup, the tea now cooler, gentler on the stomach. He watches a heron step silently along the far bank. He has seen this bird before, or one just like it, or perhaps it is the same bird, again and again with different feathers. You might picture the breeze as it moves softly through the fig leaves, brushing the edge of his robe, lifting the lightest grains of sand from the porch and setting them adrift. You might picture the lines on his hands as he strokes the rim of the cup, absently, as though remembering another morning, long ago, when he did the same. Amosi does not speak unless spoken to. He has spent so many years in conversation with gods, with neighbors, with noisy children, that now silence is its own kind of prayer. And so he waits, for sun, for warmth, for nothing in particular. The Nile murmurs in its endless patience, and the morning stretches forward like the length of a shadow just before sunrise. And across the river, a woman with a copper bowl begins to scrub a child's tunic, humming softly to herself. A tune as old as the water, and as gentle as the day that begins without announcement. Amosi takes another sip of tea. The fig leaves tremble faintly. The bench beneath him is warm now. His bare heel brushes the sand, and the day begins, not with trumpets, but with breath. The sun rises slowly over the Nile, just as it always has. Not in a rush, never in a rush. More like a long exhale warming the clay, brushing gold across the palm fronds, and gently nudging the shadows away. Amosi doesn't look at it directly. He's long past the need to greet Ra like a curious boy. The sun will do as it always does, with or without his attention. Instead, he watches how the light falls on the garden. The patch of soil he calls his is narrow and uneven, but that's the way he likes it. He's grown used to its stubbornness, its cracked ridges and soft hollows. He doesn't tend it for harvest, not anymore. He tends it to remember how it feels to nurture something, to wait for a shoot to emerge, to brush dust from a leaf and say, softly, "You're doing well." The garden has a rhythm of its own, slow, forgetful, forgiving. There's the broad-leaved bean plant curling up the crooked wooden pole. There's the pepper bush that once bore hot fruit but now mostly stretches its roots and nods in the breeze. The soil is rough in places, almost chalky, but Amosi's hands are steady as he pokes at it with a short-handled hoe, the wood worn smooth where his thumb rests. He kneels slowly. It's not easy, but the bench is close, and the earth is warm. His knees crack like old door hinges, and the ache down his left leg hums like a distant drumbeat, but he breathes through it. The air smells of wet dirt, dry straw, and something faintly sweet, maybe wild thyme from the patch just by the step. With a gourd spoon, he ladles water onto the thirsty roots. Not too much. The Nile has been low this year, and water must be saved. He knows how much each plant needs, not from counting, but from feel. From years of crouching in soil like this, of reading the droop of leaves and the color of stems. From listening in the quiet way that gardeners do. Two lizards dart from a crack in the garden wall. They pause near the shade of a terracotta shard, their eyes flicking toward him with curiosity and no fear. He doesn't move. He watches them until they vanish again into the cool crevices. In this space, there is no need to chase anything. Everything that comes in time. Behind him, the fig tree's branches stretch with a soft creak. A small breeze tugs at its leaves, which shimmer faintly, silver on one side, dark on the other. The figs are not yet ripe. He brushes one with his thumb, still firm, still green. Perhaps by the next full moon, you might picture his hands, thick-knuckled and browned from sun, fingernails rimmed with earth. There's a scar down his right forefinger, from a sickle blade years ago, the skin there rougher than the rest. His hands, once calloused from plowing, now move more slowly, more deliberately. Each motion carries weight, but not urgency. Beyond the fig tree, the narrow reed fence is half fallen. He doesn't bother to fix it. The goats don't come this close anymore. The children from the northern path once played here, climbing and running and shouting like wild herons. But they've grown. Their footsteps have moved further upriver. Now it is just the breeze and the rustle of reeds and the occasional soft crunch of his own bare heel shifting in the sand. He speaks to the garden sometimes, not loudly, just words breathed between the rows. Not even words, always, sometimes hums, sometimes clicks of the tongue. He once read that Pharaoh's farmers did the same, long before his own grandfather was born, sang to their onions and garlic as though the gods inside the soil might answer. There's something beautiful in that. Not practical, maybe, but beautiful. The garden is not large enough to feed a family, but it is enough to pass the morning, enough to give him purpose. There are no servants, no scribes, no neighbors pressing in, just the bees low among the flowering weeds, the soft pock of his spoon tapping stoneware, and the slow steam of dew lifting off the leaves. You might imagine him pausing, standing slowly, brush in hand. He leans against the tree and closes his eyes. The sun now rests against his face, not yet fierce, but steady. His breathing deepens. He could sleep here, standing. He has before. The smell of fig bark and clay has always soothed him. Sometimes, when the heat becomes too much, he rests beneath the reed awning just beside the wall. It's cool there. A cushion, a pitcher, and the stillness of woven shadow patterns dancing on the floor. But not yet. Not this early. A dog barks far off. Someone calls a name, not his, then silence again. The city, such as it is, hasn't quite woken yet. The temple steps still sleep in shadow. The ferrymen will wait another hour before loosening their boats. Amosi crouches once more, presses his palm to the earth, and smiles. There are no monuments to this garden. No stone inscriptions.
No obran statues.
But he knows, as surely as he knows his own pulse, that the garden knows him. It remembers his steps, his weight, his voice. It knows how he hums when the sun is just so, how he mutters when the ants return. And in return, it offers him the slow, endless unfolding of green. The day moves without hurry, stretching out its limbs across the rooftops, over the gardens, down to the slow-gliding river. The Nile, as always, carries the past gently on its back. Papyrus stalks grow thick along its edges, green spears rising from the muck and mud, their feathered tops nodding lazily in the heat that begins to gather even in the early light. Inside his modest home, Amosi moves through the doorway with care, placing his garden tools in the wooden niche by the door. The floor is packed clay, smoothed by years of bare feet and swept every morning with a short-handled broom. It carries the scent of warm dust and faint sandalwood, though the incense has long since burned down to ash. There is a low table in the corner, near the window that opens east toward the water. On it rests a tray with a chipped bowl, a dried bunch of desert mint tied with linen string, and a folded square of linen cloth. With steady fingers, Amosi picks through the tea leaves, choosing those still fragrant, brushing away the crumbled ones like flakes of memory. He pours water from the clay jug into a small copper kettle and places it over a bed of coals, which he stokes with a few soft breaths and a twist of palm straw. The fire sighs, then flickers to life, its glow casting gentle orange shadows across the walls. The kettle begins to warm with a soft hiss, not a whistle, just the whisper of heat finding water. As he waits, he pulls a worn scroll from the shelf above the window. It's not made of fine papyrus, not anymore. The fibers are brittle and curled at the corners. But he knows it by touch. It's a record, not of anything important to scribes or taxmen, but of the birds he once saw from this window. Doodles, really. Notes in his own hand. White ibis with scar on wing. Returned 3 days after flood. Heron? Quiet. Always alone. Watches without blinking. The script is uneven now. His hand shakes when he writes, but it doesn't matter. No one will read it. It's enough that he wrote it, that he remembers. The tea is ready. He pours slowly, the steam rising like the breath of a gentle god, curling into the morning. He sits on a cushion by the window and drinks. The mint soothes his throat, fills his chest with calm. Outside, papyrus rustles softly. The reeds know the rhythm of the day as well as he does. Fishermen pass sometimes, dragging their nets between narrow boats, their voices low, their oars lifting and dipping without splash. Amosi watches them with the patient gaze of one who once stood among them, decades ago, barefoot on damp wood, tugging ropes with a younger man's arms. The fish were heavier then, or perhaps he was just stronger. He takes another sip. From here, he can see the far bank, dotted with palms and clusters of goats. Children run there, chasing one another in figures and lines, their laughter lost in the open air but visible in the way they move. A small fire burns there, thin smoke rising, white and clean. Someone is baking flatbread. The smell arrives faintly, carried on the soft, rising breeze. You might imagine the way the light falls across his face as he leans into it, the deep lines etched beneath his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his chin, the silvered stubble of a beard he no longer shaves as often. His skin is dry, cracked at the edges, but warm now. The sun is kind in the morning. Later it will bite, but now it merely lays its hand upon his cheek. He places the scroll aside and leans back. The cushion is thin but familiar. He listens to the birds now, not watching, just listening. The flute note of the bulbul, the chitter of sparrows nesting in the beams, and always the wings, the soft beat of wings overhead. Every day in every season. In his younger years, he might have stood and fetched more firewood, might have rewrapped the scrolls to protect them from the dust, might have swept again just for the pleasure of clean lines on the floor. But not today. Today he simply watches, simply drinks, simply breathes. In the distance, a temple bell rings once. A single chime, not to announce anything urgent, just to mark the moment. Perhaps a priest stepping into the incense hall. Perhaps a ritual beginning. But to Amosi, it means only that the sun has risen high enough to stretch through the palm fronds. He closes his eyes. For a moment, everything falls still. The tea in his bowl cooling slowly. The rustle of papyrus like whispers along a corridor. The scroll on the table, curling faintly at its edge. The birds, the light, his breath. And in that moment, it is as if time bows its head and pauses with him. Later in the morning, when the sun begins to settle into its upward climb and the shadows along the inner courtyard begin to shrink, Amosi prepares to walk down toward the ferry dock. It is not far, just a bend in the path that curves behind the garden wall, through a grove of young palms and past the neighbor's apiary. He has no reason to go there today, no appointment, no errand. But walking is part of the rhythm, and rhythms must be kept. He reaches beneath the bench for his sandals. They are simple strips of dried palm fiber woven into a sole, the straps knotted through 2 small holes near the front and 1 between the heel. He made them himself months ago, or perhaps a year. Time folds on itself when you no longer count the days. He slides his right foot in, then his left. And, as always, the left strap snaps. Not completely, not violently. Just that small, familiar loosening, that soft give where the knot pulls through and the loop no longer hugs his foot. He sighs. Not a frustrated sigh, not angry. Just one that says, yes, this again. The strap that always breaks. He sits back on the low stool and examines it. The knot has come loose again. He runs his thumb along the fibers. Frayed, worn thin by steps and age. The fibers are dry and stiff, brittle like the first frost on a lotus petal, if such a thing existed here. He smiles. There is no frost in this part of Egypt. Only dry winds, slow breezes, and the endless perfume of warmed stone. He reaches for his tool pouch, a soft cloth bundle tucked beside the water jar. Inside are a few bone needles, a twisted spool of reed thread, a small bronze knife dulled with time. He selects one of the needles and begins to work the thread through the strap, tightening the frayed end, looping it back upon itself with hands that tremble slightly but still know the path of repair. His fingers remember better than his eyes. You might picture him now, hunched slightly, brow furrowed in quiet concentration, tongue pressed gently against the inside of his cheek, an old habit from his days as a boy learning how to stitch boat sails beside his uncle. That was a different time, when his hands were quick and full of fire, when a broken strap was nothing but a moment's task. Now, it is a meditation. He finishes the knot and tests the loop. It holds. For now. He knows it will come undone again, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps in 3 days. But there is a quiet joy in that, in doing it again, in knowing it will never quite be finished, but it is still worth doing. Outside, the wind rustles the fig tree again. A bird calls once, then falls silent. The path beyond the garden is empty. No carts yet, no visitors, only the sound of his sandals as he stands, the repaired strap stretching gently across his foot. He steps carefully. The walk to the ferry dock is familiar. The path is shaded in places, the clay uneven, pitted where goat hooves have passed. He moves slowly with a cane now, a curved branch smoothed by time and use. Not for pain, though pain is there. It is more for balance, for rhythm. One step, one tap. One step, one tap. The cane touches down beside each footfall like punctuation at the end of a sentence. The palms whisper overhead. At the bend in the path, the honey house comes into view. Low walls made of river brick, darkened by smoke from the oven. The beekeeper's daughter is sweeping the courtyard. She looks up, sees Amosi, and nods. She doesn't speak. He nods back. That is enough. The air smells faintly of beeswax and slow fire, sweet and warm. He passes the house and continues down the slope. The cane taps lightly on the stone, keeping rhythm with the quiet press of his breath. He does not hurry. There is nothing to hurry toward. At the edge of the river, the ferry dock waits, a plank of wood stretching into the reeds. No boats now, no passengers, just the water, thick with morning light, lapping softly against the posts. The ferry boys will come later, with voices like flutes and arms like young reeds. For now, it is silent. Amosi sits on the edge of the dock, legs dangling, the repaired sandal strap holding. For now, he lets his feet sway just above the water. The river moves beneath him, slow and brown and eternal, carries silt, secrets, stories, carries time itself. A fish jumps once, a soft splash. He watches the ripples widen, then fade. And for a long while he says nothing, just breathes, just listens. By the time Amosi returns from the ferry dock, the sun has risen high enough to stretch its warmth deep into the courtyard. The fig tree still provides shade in the eastern corner, but the wall near the house has begun to radiate with a soft, dry heat. He walks a little slower now, careful of his steps on the loose pebbles scattered along the path. The repaired sandal strap presses against the top of his foot, not painfully, just a reminder of its presence and its impermanence. When he reaches the house, a soft voice greets him from within. "Grandfather." He smiles before he even sees her. The voice is small, high-pitched, laced with sleep and curiosity. Asha, his youngest granddaughter, is visiting today. Her mother works in the linen hall by the market, and on certain mornings, she leaves Asha with him. Not because he is a nursemaid or a teacher, but because children enjoy the company of quiet things, the rhythm of old men, the silence between stories. Asha appears in the doorway a moment later. She is still in her morning tunic, the hem uneven from a rushed dressing, her hair wild and loose about her shoulders. She rubs one eye with the back of her hand and looks at him with mild suspicion, as though he might vanish if she blinks. "You went without me," she says. "I didn't want to wake you. I wasn't asleep." "You looked asleep." "I wasn't." He chuckles softly, and she crosses her arms with dramatic seriousness. Her bare feet make soft pats on the clay floor as she follows him into the courtyard, trailing close behind, like a duckling chasing shadow. He lowers himself onto the bench with care, sets his cane beside him, and gestures to the cushion. "Come here," he says. "Your hair looks like it's been talking to jackals." She giggles and flops down on the cushion in front of him, legs crossed. Her back is straight, but her head tilts slightly, inviting his hands. He reaches for the small basket by the wall, the one with the comb, the wooden pins, and a twist of flax thread. He made the basket years ago, long before she was born. It held onions, tools, fish, even a baby sparrow once. Now it holds her hair things. It has grown old with him. He begins gently. His hands are large, and her hair is fine, soft like woven threads of the moon. He untangles slowly, with fingers that have learned to be patient. He does not pull. He never pulls. The comb glides through the strands in slow, careful sweeps, and Asha leans into the rhythm like a boat caught in a gentle current. "You used to do this for my mother," she says. "I still do," he replies. "When she lets me. She has too much hair. Yes, it's like a river." She says yours used to be like hers. It was. What happened? He smiles again, fingers still moving through her hair. Time. Does time eat your hair? In a way. She nods, satisfied by this explanation, and falls silent for a while. He parts her hair with his fingers, creating sections as he's done thousands of times. For daughters, nieces, cousins, wives, each braid is a small ritual, a line of memory, a quiet prayer woven in reverse. You might imagine the breeze as it stirs the loose strands, lifting them slightly before they are captured and tucked away. His fingers move in steady patterns. Under, over, pull. Under, over, pull. The rhythm as natural to him as breath. He doesn't talk much while he braids. It is not a time for conversation. It is a time for nearness, for the simple communion of hands and hair and morning light. Asha hums softly to herself, a tune he doesn't recognize, perhaps one she made up, or one passed to her in dreams. A bird calls from the fig tree. The scent of warmed linen rises from the sunlit stone. He finishes the first braid, then the second, securing each with a small loop of dyed thread. The third braid is always the most difficult. It curves behind the ear and likes to slip free if the child wiggles. But she stays still today. Perhaps the sun has gentled her. Perhaps the breeze has lulled her into stillness. "There," he says quietly, tying the final loop. "Like a princess." "I'm not a princess. Could have fooled me. I'm a lion. Even better." She stands and stretches her arms. The braids swing gently around her shoulders. She turns once, then twice as if to test their balance. "Do you want to hear my roar?" she asks. He raises an eyebrow. "Only if you whisper it." She grins, leans in close and growls. Softly, like a kitten pretending it's fierce, he taps the top of her head. "Well done," he says. You might picture the way she dances back toward the house, her feet barely touching the floor, her braids bouncing, her voice carrying some invented song that repeats the same line again and again. And Amosi remains on the bench, watching her vanish into the doorway. He closes his eyes for a moment. The sun has moved higher now. The shadows have shifted. The day continues, slow and steady. The fig tree rustles. A jar clinks in the distance. Someone pours water into a basin, the splash echoing briefly before fading. And somewhere deep in the house, a lion cub sings to herself in braided joy. Later that afternoon, when the courtyard has grown quiet again and the child's laughter has given way to the soft scuffling of her bare feet playing elsewhere in the house, Amosi sits with his back against the fig tree, one knee drawn up slightly, the other stretched before him. The light has taken on that particular tone it often does after midday, not yet golden, but beginning to think about it. Warm, not sharp. Deep, not bright. In his hands, he holds a small wooden box, rectangular, faded with age, carved on the lid with the simple figure of a seated man in a skullcap. The image is old, rubbed soft by time. Ta, the god of craftsmen, of creation through word and will. The god of sculptors, of those who built with their hands and believed the world began not with light, but with speech. Amosi opens the box. Inside, carefully wrapped in a square of linen that smells faintly of cedar, is a small figurine, also of Ta. The carving is crude, almost childlike, but there is a stillness to it, a reverence. He made it many years ago when his fingers were still nimble, when his tools were sharp, before his back stooped, before his knees stiffened, before sleep came during daylight hours. He places the figure gently on the low stone ledge beside him, beneath the fig's bowed branches, and begins to hum. It is not a loud sound, not the booming chant of temple priests, not the rehearsed cadence of those trained in ritual. It is more like a remembering, a thread of tune passed down in kitchens and workshops, murmured by hands polishing tools or grinding pigment for murals. Amosi's voice is soft and dry, like pages turning in a warm room. Ta, who speaks and the stone listens. Ta, whose breath shapes the wood and whose silence binds the clay. He does not remember all the words, not precisely, but the melody is intact, and the words he forgets he replaces with his own. Not out of irreverence, but necessity. Worship, he thinks, should not be limited to perfect memory. It should be like breath, gentle, steady, continuous. Asha wanders back into the courtyard and stops when she hears him. She does not speak, but sits a few paces away, knees hugged to her chest, watching him with quiet interest. The hymn continues, his voice rising and falling like a lullaby carried on warm air. Maker of frames, carver of lines, you who know the grain of every tree. He pauses to wet his lips, then continues. The fig leaves above rustle lightly, and a single fruit drops to the earth beside the wall. Asha flinches at the sound, then giggles. He smiles without looking at her and keeps humming. The courtyard feels smaller somehow, drawn in by the hum, by the weight of tradition echoing softly between stone and skin. It is not a temple. There are no priests, no incense burns, no sacred vessels are lifted in offering. But there is reverence here. There is intention. Ta, he thinks, is not confined to temple walls. Ta lives in quiet places, in chipped figurines, in calloused hands, in the act of singing something half-forgotten to someone too young to remember it. When the hymn ends, he lets the silence settle. It does not feel empty, feels full, like a bowl just filled with water. Asha says nothing, and he does not break the silence with speech. Instead, he reaches over, picks up the dropped fig, and hands it to her. She takes it gently, turns it over in her hands, and sets it on her lap without biting into it. The fig is not quite ripe, but its skin is soft, and its weight is pleasant. "Why do you sing to him?" she asks finally. He considers this. "Because I remember," he says, "and because forgetting feels unkind." She nods slowly, though she does not yet understand. They sit together like that for a long while. The old man with his hands resting gently on his knees, and the child with a fig in her lap, her head tilted upward to watch a single cloud drift past the edge of the house wall. A breeze passes through the courtyard. The little wooden figure of Ta leans slightly to one side on the ledge, as if listening, as if agreeing. The sun begins its slow descent toward the western edge of the village, casting longer shadows across the courtyard. The fig tree's limbs stretch in lean silhouettes against the wall, and the air grows heavier. Not hot, but full, thick with the scent of baked earth and ripening fruit. This is the hour when the street beyond the garden wall begins to murmur back to life, when the voices of sellers and neighbors rise with the dust. Asha has returned indoors with her fig, her small feet padding over the clay floor like soft echoes, her braids bouncing gently behind her. Amosi remains beneath the tree, where the light is still mild, the bench still warm. He leans back, closes his eyes, and listens to the rhythm of afternoon in Egypt, slow and steady, like the steady lapping of the Nile at its edge. And then, faintly at first, there comes a sound from beyond the gate. A cart creaks, a wheel rolls lazily over stone, and a voice, melodic, practiced, familiar, floats through the warm air. Dates from the valley, sweet and soft, sweeter than kisses, sweeter than dreams. Amosi opens his eyes and smiles. He knows that voice. Everyone in this part of the village does. It belongs to Khalef, the date seller, whose songs arrive before his shadow, whose cart is older than some of the trees, and whose charm is as consistent as the sun itself. The gate squeaks open, not by Khalef's hand. He never lets himself in, but by Asha's. She has heard him, too, and runs to meet him. The fig now forgotten, the excitement of the cart always too much to resist. Amosi hears the exchange without moving. He knows it by heart. Dates for a lion? Khalef's voice teases. "I'm not a lion. I'm a princess now. Then these are royal dates. Special ones. Just for you." A pause. Then Asha's voice. Do they have pits? Only the best kind of pits. She giggles. Moments later, the cart wheels creak into the courtyard. Khalif appears, tall, lean, robes faded to the color of dry wood. His beard long and braided with a string of copper coins. He tips his head in greeting as Amosi rises slowly from the bench. Old one, Khalif says with a smile. Still here. Still here. Amosi replies, stepping forward. And you still singing to fruit. If I don't sing, the dates go sour. Is that so? I've tested it. Science. Amosi chuckles softly and peers into the cart. It is a wooden tray on 2 wheels, shaded by a linen canopy. Neatly arranged are rows of dried dates, some plump and sticky, others smaller and rolled in flour to keep them from clinging. A small jar of honey sits in the corner, alongside squares of pressed fig and crushed walnut. He reaches into his pocket and retrieves a small ceramic token, one of the local trade markers, smooth and reddish-brown, stamped with the mark of a reed. Khalif nods and accepts it with flair. For the elder, he says, 2 of the softest, and 1 of the sun-dried. Asha tugs at Khalif's sleeve. Do lions get a date? Khalif leans down. Only if they promise not to roar. I forgot how. Then you may have 3. He places them carefully in her palm, and she darts off into the shade with her prize. Amosi selects his dates one by one, holding each between thumb and forefinger, pressing gently to check the softness, the ripeness. Khalif watches him with easy patience. How's the strap? He asks, gesturing at Amosi's sandal. Holding. Until tomorrow, I bet. Most likely. They sit for a time on the low bench, sharing a few dates, chewing slowly. The silence between them is comfortable. Khalif doesn't press conversation. He is good at reading space, at matching the pace of those he visits. His cart has taken him to every doorway in the village and beyond, and he has learned that old men prefer talk like tea, warm, slow, and optional. The dates are sweet, deeply so, but not overpowering. They melt slowly on the tongue, leaving behind a whisper of sun, of sugar, of time. You might picture the 2 men there beneath the fig tree, one young enough to walk the fields, one old enough to remember them as they were before the last flood. The date seller's cart leans slightly on the uneven stone, its canopy shifting with the breeze. The air smells of fruit, dust, and afternoon. Amosi leans his head back. Do you ever think, he says quietly, that we are like the dates? Khalif raises an eyebrow. Sweet and sticky?
No.
Gathered, sorted, pressed into jars, passed from hand to hand, eventually eaten. Khalif laughs. Not loudly, just a short, warm laugh that rests in the chest. I suppose, he replies, but some are planted, and some, if forgotten long enough, turn to wine. They sit a while longer, saying little. Asha returns with sticky fingers and a satisfied grin. She climbs onto the bench beside her grandfather and rests her head against his arm. Khalif gathers his cart with practiced motions, adjusts the canopy, and steps backward toward the gate. Until next time, he calls. Until next time, Amosi replies. And then the cart is gone, the wheels creaking gently into the distance, and the courtyard is quiet again. The sun begins to dip, slowly, into the western sky. The shadows stretch longer now. The fig tree leans further over the bench, its leaves trembling faintly in the shifting light, casting dappled patterns across the clay floor. The warmth of the day begins to soften, pulling back just enough to let the skin breathe again. In the stillness after Khalif's departure, the courtyard hums with a different sort of quiet. Not silence, but contentment. Asha has grown sleepy, her head still resting on Amosi's arm, her breaths becoming longer, slower, more even. She does not speak, and he does not move her. He simply lets her weight lean against him like a warm shawl. Then, as if summoned by some ancient pact, there comes the lightest scrape of claws against stone. A soft rustling at the edge of the courtyard. The fig tree rustles, though there's no breeze now, and from the shadow beside the garden gate, the cat returns. It is not his cat. He has never fed it, never named it. But it comes almost every day, usually in the hour when the shadows are long and the light has turned gold. Sleek and pale, with a narrow face and clever eyes, the cat moves like poured oil, low to the ground, tail curved like a reed in water. It slips beneath the bench without looking at him, circles once, then twice, and settles near his feet. Its eyes half close, its ears twitch once. Asha doesn't open her eyes, but she smiles faintly. "She's back," she whispers. Amosi nods. "She always comes." "Why?" He considers this for a moment. "Because," he says slowly, "some things know where quiet lives." The cat stretches, front paws out, claws just grazing the edge of the mat, and lets out a long, exaggerated sigh. A sound so delicate it could be mistaken for wind through grass. Then it curls into a tight coil and begins to clean its paws with lazy concentration. Amosi has never tried to pet the cat. It is not that kind of animal. Comes not for touch, but for presence. He has learned to understand that. Years ago, there was a different cat, darker in color, bolder in stride, that belonged to his wife. It had green eyes and a harsh voice, and it would climb onto her lap without warning, purring like thunder. She used to feed it scraps of fish in the evenings, and she'd scold it when it scratched the bench legs. That cat is long gone now, returned to the earth or the reeds or wherever animals go when they vanish from memory. But this cat, this new cat, behaves almost the same. Sometimes he wonders if it is the same spirit in a different body, returned not to haunt, but to remember alongside him. You might picture the courtyard now. The bench, the child dozing, the cat blinking slowly at the shadows. The fig leaves whispering secrets overhead. The smell of dates lingering in the air, sweet and soft. The sky slowly deepening to ochre. The first stars not yet visible but waiting just beyond the veil. Asha shifts slightly in her sleep and murmurs something. The cat lifts its head, ears flicking, then rests again. Amosi closes his eyes. He breathes in through his nose, the air warm and heavy with life, and exhales slowly, evenly. In ancient days, cats were sacred, beloved of Batet, protectors of the home, guardians of stillness. Statues were carved in their image, and temples honored their grace. Even now, Amosi thinks they are not animals so much as visitors, witnesses to the slow unfolding of human life. This one knows the sound of his footsteps. It appears when the sun leans low. It disappears before night fully arrives. Sometimes, it waits at the gate before he even notices. Other times, it does not come at all. But when it does, there is a rightness to it, as though it knows something he does not. Asha stirs again. "Tell her a story," she murmurs, eyes still closed. Amosi glances down at the cat, whose eyes are also closed now. "What kind of story?" he whispers. "A story for a cat." He thinks for a moment, then smiles. His voice is low and soft, more breath than sound. "There once was a cat," he begins, "born in the shadow of the library at Heliopolis. She walked among scrolls and slept in the curve of ink pots. The priests called her Silent One, and she was never seen twice in the same place. But every evening, just before the lamps were lit, she would walk the halls once, in perfect silence, and all the scribes would put down their pens, because they knew that when the cat walked, it was time to stop thinking and start listening." Asha hums sleepily, and the cat, almost as if in response, opens one eye. "She never stayed long," he continues, "just long enough to remind them that words are important, but quiet is sacred." The cat stretches again, then rises without noise and slips away, back toward the shadow near the gate. It does not look back. It never does. But Amosi knows it will return, as always, because some things know where quiet lives. Evening drapes itself slowly across the village. The heat, once firm and constant, begins to retreat into the stones, into the folds of linen, into the narrow shadows cast by palms and doorways. The sun now brushes low against the horizon, its light slipping between rooftops, gilding the reed fences and the curved lip of the water jars. Birds make their last flights of the day, soft arcs across the sky, returning to the palms with no rush at all. Amosi remains on the bench beneath the fig tree. This bench has been his for decades. Not owned, not claimed, but shaped by him. The edge where he rests his hands is worn smooth by skin. The center leans slightly, a result of one leg pressing deeper into the earth over time, and the crack along the backrest holds the dried stem of a weed that grew there 1 year and never fully let go. He does not wish to fix it. This bench, like his hands, carries the memory of years not through perfection, but through wear. It has held him after long days and short naps. It has caught tears, laughter, bowls of soup, and the weight of sleeping children. He knows every creak it makes. Every groan of the wood is like the voice of an old friend. You might picture the light now, long and golden, casting the fig leaves in silhouette. Their shadows stretch across Amosi's linen robe, dark veins tracing his chest, his lap, the bench. A breeze stirs and the fig tree responds, whispering its thoughts to no one in particular. The figs hang above him, some plump and dusky, others still green. He reaches up, gently pressing one between his fingers. Still firm. Not yet. He doesn't mind waiting. The sweetest figs always come to those who forget their waiting. Asha is asleep now, curled on the cushion beside him, her head resting on the crook of his hip, one hand wrapped around the last of her dates. Her mouth hangs open slightly, lips sticky from fruit. A thin line of hair clings to her forehead, damp from the heat, her breathing slow and rhythmic. He doesn't wake her. Instead, he places a hand gently on her back, not to stir her, just to be sure of her warmth. The presence of a sleeping child is one of the few things in life that stills even memory. Her weight is slight, but grounding, like a stone in the palm, like the smell of baking bread, like the sound of the Nile lapping gently against its banks at night. A small gnat buzzes lazily near his face, and he waves it away with the tip of his fan. A thin paddle of woven reeds, cracked along one edge but still effective. He waves it again, not to chase the insect, but just to feel the rhythm of movement. Beyond the courtyard, the sound of evening begins. A door slams softly 2 houses over. A child calls out for someone. A pot is set down with a thump. Voices rise and fall, close and then distant, the village breathing in pulses. A soft inhaling and exhaling of sound and light and scent. He listens. This is his favorite time. Not dawn, though dawn is gentle and clean. Not midday, which is often too harsh, too full. No, this hour, this edge of night, holds something quieter. Something wrapped in memory. He has sat here on hundreds of such evenings, perhaps thousands. He has watched his children play in the dirt here, watched them run with sandals untied, watched them sulk, then grow, then leave. Some moved away. Some remain nearby. Others rest in the earth. The courtyard has seen it all. Sometimes he thinks the bench remembers them better than he does. The stone beside him is warm from the sun. The fig leaves above sway with soft rustling. The shadow of the tree now stretches across the far wall, its edges softening as the light fades further. He breathes in deeply, not dramatically, just enough to notice. The air tastes of dust, fruit, and something cool, the promise of nightfall, perhaps. A blessing carried on the river breeze. Somewhere a lantern has been lit, the faint smell of oil and smoke slipping into the air. Asha shifts in her sleep and murmurs something incoherent. Her legs stretch slightly, one bare foot tapping against his thigh. He stays still. To move would be to break the spell, to disturb the weight of rest and shadow and time. And so he stays. The bench holds him as it always has. The tree shades him. The night approaches without fear or noise. You might imagine it. The fading sky, streaked with thin clouds, the line of roof tiles catching the last light, the smell of fig and dust and cooling stone. A courtyard with nothing to prove. A bench that has held generations. And on that bench, a man with silver hair and slow hands, his granddaughter resting like a curled leaf beside him, as the evening closes its gentle hands around them both. The last light of the sun disappears behind the rooftops with quiet grace. It doesn't fall, doesn't vanish. It simply folds itself into the horizon and becomes memory. The courtyard grows dim. Not dark, not yet, but touched with the kind of soft twilight that blurs the edges of things, makes the familiar feel dreamlike. Asha sleeps deeply now, unmoved even as the breeze grows cooler. Amosi shifts slowly, careful not to disturb her, and reaches behind him for a small wooden box tucked beneath the bench. He pulls it out with both hands, setting it in his lap like an old friend. The box is plain, made of cedar smoothed by touch and polished long ago with fig oil. Its hinges creak as he opens it, not from rust but from the stiffness of age. The same kind that slows his knees, that bows his spine, that makes sleep arrive earlier each evening. Inside the box lies a mirror. It is small, oval-shaped, the bronze dull with time and spotted faintly from years of oxidation. The handle is wrapped in linen that was once white, now yellowed and soft as a moth's wing. He lifts it carefully, holding it in both hands, and tilts it toward what little light remains. His reflection looks back, blurred, shadowed, interrupted by the age of the glass and the imperfections on its surface. But still, it is him. The lines are familiar, the eyes the same as when he was a boy, though they sit deeper now, surrounded by folds and years. He doesn't look at himself often, not because he avoids it, there is no shame in age, but because reflection is rarely necessary when your days are lived slowly, inwardly. Still, the mirror calls to him from time to time, a soft voice, like a reed flute at night, reminding him that the past is never far, only quieter. This mirror was a gift. He remembers that clearly. A wedding gift, in fact, not from his bride, but from his aunt, a woman known for her sharp tongue and her sharper sense of humor. "You'll need this," she said, pressing it into his hand with a wink, "to remember what you once looked like before marriage steals your time." He hadn't understood then, but he does now. The mirror was hers first. He suspects it was her mother's before that. The design is old, a simple lotus bloom at the base of the handle, etched so lightly now it's more memory than mark. He gazes into it without urgency. You might picture the way his eyes soften, not from sadness, but from familiarity. Seeing oneself at this age is not a shock. It's a quiet reunion. He tilts the mirror slightly, catching the outline of his granddaughter where she sleeps at his side. Her mouth hangs open slightly, one braid pressed flat against her cheek. The contrast is sharp and beautiful. Time curled beside itself. He chuckles softly, a low sound deep in his throat. Setting the mirror aside, he reaches into the box again and pulls out a small piece of folded linen. Inside is a faded scrap of blue thread, no longer vibrant but still strong. It was once sewn into the hem of his wife's best robe. She used to carry this mirror, too, tucking it carefully into her sash whenever they traveled. Always wrapped, always safe. He remembers watching her use it. Not often. She was not vain. But on feast days or before visiting friends, or when dressing for festival nights, she would sit by the window and hold it in her lap, tilting it with one hand while braiding her hair with the other. Sometimes she would catch him watching her, and she would smile without speaking. That smile lives inside the mirror, too. He places the thread back in its wrap, folds it carefully, and returns it to the box. Then he lays the mirror back inside and closes the lid slowly. It makes a soft click, not loud but final. He rests his hands on the box for a moment longer, then leans back again. Above him, the first stars appear. Not many, just a few pinpricks against the deepening blue. The sky over the Nile is slow to fill, as though waiting for permission from the palms. A lamp is lit in the house behind him. Its faint glow spills out across the courtyard floor, just enough to catch the gleam of the mirror's box where it rests by his hip. Asha stirs, murmuring, but does not wake. And Amosi, looking up toward the stars, speaks softly to no one. Still here, not as a declaration, not as a question, just a reminder, to the mirror, to the night, to himself. Still here, and the fig tree whispers back in kind. The hallway inside the house is narrow and dim, its walls smooth and cool to the touch, even as the warmth of the day lingers in the courtyard. The floor is packed clay, swept daily by a short palm broom whose bristles fan out like a sunburst. The lantern in the corner flickers faintly, casting long, swaying shadows along the walls, and with it comes the scent, unmistakable, earthy, and floral, of henna, clings to the air. That scent, not strong or invasive, but soft, like something remembered rather than freshly made. Asha must have opened the old jar earlier, the one kept on the narrow shelf beside the storeroom door. She loves the way it smells, though she doesn't yet know how to apply it. Sometimes she dips her finger into the dried powder and dabs it on her wrist, pretending it's perfume. Amosi walks slowly down the hallway now, passing the mark she left last week. A small smudge of brownish red, the shape of her palm outlined faintly on the plaster wall. He hasn't asked for it to be cleaned. It reminds him of the old days, when such prints lined the walls during weddings and festival nights, when women gathered in groups, their voices rising like birdsong, henna thick on their fingertips, laughter caught between verses of song. He pauses by the doorway and breathes in deeply. Henna, mixed with warm water and left to steep. Henna, stirred with lemon juice and ground figure. Henna, painted onto fingers, ankles, palms. It is the smell of joy wrapped in ritual. A scent carried on the bodies of brides, of mothers, of little girls pretending to be older. A scent woven into memory. His wife used to prepare it once a month, even when she grew older. Not for festivals, not for company, just for herself. She would sit in the hallway with a shallow dish, stirring the powder slowly, humming under her breath, the smell curling into every room like an invisible thread tying them all together. Sometimes she would smear it across her feet, smile and say, "Now even the dust will have something pretty to kiss." Asha comes padding into the hallway, still rubbing her eyes, her cheeks slightly flushed from sleep. "It smells like mama," she whispers, her voice raspy with the edges of a nap. Amosi kneels beside her, his knees slow to bend, one hand on the wall to steady himself. "Yes," he says. "Your mother used to help make it, too. Long ago. Can I wear some?" she asks. He tilts his head. "Only if you promise not to paint the cat." She giggles, then skips down the hall to the shelf. She knows exactly where the jar is. A small clay pot with a cracked lid and the faintest outline of a painted lotus flower. She brings it back carefully, both hands cupped beneath it like an offering. He watches her remove the lid with the same solemnity he's seen priests use to open sacred scrolls. The powder inside is deep, reddish-brown, its surface cracked like dried earth after a long summer. She dips one finger in, gently, respectfully, and presses a dot onto the back of her hand. "Will it stay?" she asks. "For a little while. Then it's like time." He nods. She has a way of saying things he doesn't expect. He retrieves a thin reed brush from a cup near the door, old but still usable, and sits with her on the hallway bench. The hallway smells more strongly now, the scent rising as the powder warms in the open air. Together, they mix a bit with water in a shallow shell dish. The paste forms slowly, grainy and dark, like soil after rain. You might picture them there, grandfather and child, bent over a shell of old dye, tracing soft lines onto skin. He draws a circle on her palm, then a spiral, then a single dot in the center of her thumb. She watches intently, her mouth slightly open, not daring to speak. "Do you want one too?" she whispers. He hesitates, then holds out his hand. "Just a little," he says. She takes the brush and draws a lopsided star on the base of his wrist. It's not perfect, far from it. The lines waver, the symmetry leans, but he smiles at it as though it were carved from gold. "It's a lion star," she explains. "I thought you were a princess now. I can be both." He nods. "Yes, you can." The henna darkens as it dries, curling the edges of the lines slightly, setting into the skin. The smell thickens for a while, then begins to soften again, mingling with the cooling air of early evening. Asha leans her head against his shoulder. "I like when it smells like this," she says. He places his hand gently over hers. "So do I. In the hallway, the shadows stretch longer still. The lantern flickers again, casting its light across their painted hands, across the jar, across the wall where the child's palm print still rests like a ghost of play. And the house, for now, smells of women long gone and those yet to grow. Later that night, long after Asha has been put to bed and the hallway has fallen still, Amosi sits alone on the rooftop beneath the stars. The house is quiet now, the kind of quiet that breathes deeply, like a sleeping animal. Downstairs, a single lantern remains lit, casting a dull orange glow up the wall. The fig tree below rustles faintly in the breeze, its leaves whispering old secrets to the wind. But up here, above it all, there is only the sky, wide, patient, scattered with stars so soft they seem to hover just above his reach. The breeze is cool now, not sharp, not cold, just enough to lift the corner of his robe, to tug gently at the edges of memory. He remembers nights like this from many years ago, when the rooftops of Thebes or Memphis seemed to stretch forever, one house blending into the next, the city alive even after sunset. Back then, the temples never slept. The priests kept to their rituals, the watchers to their duties. And the drums, those deep, deliberate drums, would echo through the streets like the slow, steady heartbeat of the gods. He used to love them. As a boy, he'd sneak to the rooftop and sit just like this, legs folded, chin in hand, listening for the first thump. It always came after the sun had fully set, when the stars had gathered enough courage to show themselves. One long beat, then silence, then another, as though the gods themselves were waking in pieces, stretching before speech. But as he grew older, the sound changed. Not in pitch, not in rhythm, the drums were always the same, but in meaning. In his 20s, they marked responsibility. Reminders of festival schedules, of civic duties, of offerings to prepare. In his middle years, the sound became intrusive, something that pulled him from sleep when he needed rest. And now, at his age, the drums, when they happen at all, feel like interruptions. Disruptions in the stillness he's come to treasure. When did they get so loud? He mutters aloud. There are no drums tonight, not in this small village. The nearest temple lies beyond the far bend of the river, and even its ceremonies have grown infrequent. The priests are older now, too, and the festivals come slower. Yet the memory of the drums lingers, loud in his bones. He presses his palm to his chest. The rhythm is still there, slow, steady. The same beat he once felt in his heels as he danced in temple courtyards, sandal straps slapping the stone with youthful abandon. The same rhythm he matched as he pulled oars down the canals, as he stirred bread dough with a wooden spoon, as he pressed kisses to his wife's fingers before dawn. The beat of life, the beat of time, the beat that once lived in drums. You might imagine him there, silver hair haloed in starlight, skin lined and soft, his robe fluttering slightly in the night air. His cane rests beside him, unused now. He does not need it here. The rooftop is smooth and familiar, the same clay tiles he helped lay when the house was first built, their edges now worn round by wind and decades. Somewhere in the distance, a jackal calls. Not harshly, just one short yelp, followed by silence. Perhaps another calls back. Perhaps not. The silence returns quickly, as it always does out here. He closes his eyes, tilts his head slightly back, and lets the breeze pass over his face. Sometimes he wonders whether the gods grow tired of noise, whether they retreat from the chants and incense and loud proclamations and instead sit beside fig trees like this one, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant splash of fish in the dark. He imagines Ta, the god he sang to earlier, not in a great temple, but on a bench like his, hands dusty, a carving knife resting across his lap. Silent, still, content. Perhaps the gods grow old, too. A light from the house behind flickers and fades. The last flame is out now. Below him, the village sleeps. The Nile winds its dark body through the land, unseen but not unfelt. It is never silent, not truly. It breathes. It murmurs. It remembers. A moth dances briefly past his shoulder, its wings catching a hint of starlight before vanishing into shadow. He does not startle. There is nothing in the night that frightens him anymore. The world is too old for fear, too soft at the edges. He reaches down and taps the tile beside him once, twice, 3 times, the rhythm of the temple drums, then stops. The sound fades quickly into the air. Too loud, he thinks. Even now, too loud. And so he listens instead to the silence that follows. The great soft hush of night, the breath between stories, the pause between prayers. And he smiles, because the silence carries more than the drums ever did. The next morning breaks softly, as it always does. Amosi wakes before the light, before the birds, before the river begins to speak again. He does not rise at once. Instead, he lies still on his woven mat, letting his breath settle into rhythm with the quiet hum of early air, that near silence full of promise, like a reed flute waiting for its first note. When he does sit up, he does so slowly, without a sound, careful not to disturb the peace around him. The house still slumbers. Asha's breaths drift from the other room, long and content. She dreams deeply, without worry, and that makes his heart rest easier. He pulls his shawl over his shoulders, rises, and lights a small lamp near the threshold. The sun is still a thin line along the edge of the horizon, barely touching the window's curve. It's a good hour for remembering, and today memory is knocking gently, as it often does when the light is pale and the wind is still. He walks toward the rear corner of the house, where a small, uneven alcove holds a battered wooden chest. It's not locked, hasn't been for years, and he opens it without hesitation. Inside, beneath folded linens and a small jar of dried dates, rests a bundle of old scrolls wrapped in linen strips, bound with a leather cord darkened by age. He unties the cord and sets it aside. The scrolls are brittle, the fibers dry and faintly curled at the edges. Some are full tax records, old festival calendars, his own notes from when he was still keeping watch over grain supplies at the docks. But one scroll sits apart from the others, slimmer, sealed at the end with wax long cracked and faded. He lifts it gently, turns it in his hands, and exhales. It is a letter, one he wrote many years ago, one he never sent, to his brother. Amosi hasn't spoken his brother's name aloud in many years. The name lives inside him now, folded into the crease between breath and silence. His brother was younger by only a year, though they grew up like twins, wrestling in dust, chasing stray cats through alleyways, whispering jokes during long, dry sermons. Their paths split in adulthood. Not by choice at first. One was sent north to serve a grain master in Abydos. The other remained to help their aging mother. Letters passed between them for a while, first warm and full of life, then gradually less often, then only in times of ceremony, births, deaths, the occasional blessing exchanged during harvest festivals. And then silence. Not an argument, not a quarrel, just the kind of silence that grows slowly, like lichen on stone. First, unnoticed, then unspoken, then unmoved. You might picture him now, sitting on a low stool near the alcove, scroll in hand, his fingers tracing the faded string of wax that once sealed his words. He never broke it, never mailed it. The letter has lived in this chest longer than some of his neighbors have been alive. He closes his eyes and tries to recall what it said. He doesn't have to try hard. The words live just beneath the surface, like water beneath sand. It wasn't a dramatic letter. It held no anger, no plea, just news. Simple, domestic things. His wife had planted blue hibiscus near the courtyard. The younger child had learned to read the water levels by sight. The fig tree was bearing early. There had been a festival in the village, and the lanterns were strung too low, and someone had bumped their head, and everyone had laughed. He wrote it late one night, after hearing from a traveling merchant that his brother had passed through town 3 days prior, without stopping. That stung more than he expected. So he wrote, not to accuse, not to question, just to say, I'm still here. But then he folded it, sealed it, set it aside, and never sent it. Why? He doesn't quite remember. Perhaps he thought he would revise it. Perhaps he thought he would see him soon and say it all aloud. Perhaps he simply forgot. And when the days stretched into seasons, and the seasons into years, the letter became something else. A memory of intention. He breaks the seal now, gently, reverently, and unrolls the scroll. The ink has faded but is still legible. His handwriting was steadier then, firm, straight, confident. He reads it silently, line by line, nodding softly at the details he'd forgotten. The way he described the festival, the note about the neighbor's new goat, a line about the river being lower than usual, the fish hiding further from the shallows. Then, at the end, just before the signature, "I hope you're well. I miss your laugh, the one that starts before you even smile." He closes the scroll and exhales through his nose, long and slow. There are no tears, not because he does not mourn, but because the mourning has already passed through him like wine through wheat. The grief lives there now quietly, not sharp, not urgent, just resting, like the letter in his hand. You might picture him folding the scroll again, not tightly, not neatly, just enough to wrap it once more in linen and return it to its resting place. He does not reseal it. It has been read. That is enough. The sun has now climbed just enough to light the courtyard beyond the window. The fig tree's shadow shifts along the wall. A bird calls once, then twice. The smell of morning begins again. Earth, tea, old clay. Amosi stands, slower than before, but steady. He places the scroll back in the chest, folds the linen over it, and closes the lid. Perhaps one day Asha will find it. Perhaps not. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it was written, that the words were formed, that the love, though never mailed, was real. And as he walks back toward the doorway, the old floor beneath his feet creaks softly in greeting. Still here. The garden smells different this morning. It isn't unpleasant, just unfamiliar. A new shade of green, a different edge to the damp air rising from the clay. The fig tree is still, its leaves unmoved by breeze, and the sunlight filters through them in a pale, tired way, like it too has aged overnight. Amosi steps into the courtyard with a small watering jar in hand. The rim is chipped. It leaks slightly at the base when tilted too far, but he knows the angle by heart now. The water should hit the soil in a soft stream, not a splash. That's what his father once taught him, long before the house, before the chest, before any thoughts of letters never sent. He kneels at the edge of the herb patch, a small square of soil framed by old bricks. This is where he planted coriander last season. Or maybe it was fenugreek. He can't quite remember. The stems look familiar, yes, but their scent has changed. Or maybe it's his memory that has. He pinches one of the stalks gently and brings his fingers to his nose. A faint aroma rises, something between bitter and sweet. He closes his eyes and waits for the name to come. It doesn't. He tries again. Another leaf, broader, darker. He crumbles it lightly between his thumb and forefinger. The scent reminds him of soup. Thick winter soup that his wife used to make when the nights were long. He sees her standing in the kitchen, her hair pinned back, humming softly, the pot steaming in the background. But the name? Gone. You might imagine him there, crouched in his own garden, surrounded by plants he knows in body but not in word. He has tended them for years, shaped their growth, watched them return in season after season. And now, suddenly, their names are drifting like pollen in wind, present, but unreachable. He chuckles softly, not out of shame, but out of wonder. Perhaps they've changed their names, he murmurs, like people do when they grow tired of being called the same thing. He presses his hand to the soil. It's damp still, cool beneath the surface. That means the water will hold until midday. No need to drown the roots. The earth knows what it needs, even if he forgets. Asha comes into the courtyard a few moments later, her hair a mess of half-unraveled braids, sleep still clinging to the corners of her eyes. "Grandfather," she says. "What's this one called?" She points at the plant he just held. He looks at her, then at the plant and shrugs. "I don't know anymore," he replies. She squints. "Mama says that's cumin." He nods. She's probably right. She kneels beside him and touches another. And this, he studies it carefully. The leaves are jagged, silvery green. He knows it once had a name that tasted like wind on the tongue. He can't place it. That one, he says slowly, might be time. Might be. It's forgotten who it is. She giggles, then leans her head against his shoulder. Can I name one? Of course. She taps a soft, bushy stem near the wall. This one is called Nib. Nib. It's short for nothing in particular. Fair enough. They sit together for a while, naming herbs. Some get proper names. Fennel, mint, dill. When he can remember them. Others become inventions. Scratchy leaf, almost sour, green hair. The names don't matter much, he thinks, not really. The plants will grow regardless. Asha picks a few leaves, crumbles them into her palm, and lifts them to her nose. This one smells like soup, she says. That's probably coriander. Or memory. You might imagine the two of them, old man and child, crouched in the morning garden, surrounded by unnamed green. The sun has fully risen now, and with it comes the hum of bees, the shuffle of birds, the creak of a cart passing on the road beyond the wall. Time moves, but softly, as though it too is being careful not to disturb the roots. Amosi places the watering jar down and leans back onto his heels. The garden is small. The soil is tired. The names may come back tomorrow, or they may not, but the leaves still grow, and he still knows how to listen. Later that day, with the sun hanging high but not unkind, Amosi finds himself in the storage room at the back of the house. It's a cool, shaded space, dug slightly below the level of the courtyard, where the air holds tight to the smell of old linen, dry wood, and the faint tang of clay. The walls are lined with shelves made from date palm planks, slightly bowed in places, but still firm. Everything in this room feels like it has waited patiently for decades, untouched yet never forgotten. He's not sure what brought him here exactly. Maybe he was looking for something, or maybe he just needed to be among old things. Some days are like that, where the soul wants to be surrounded by quiet witnesses, objects that do not ask questions, that do not remind him of what he's forgotten. Just shelves and dust and time. He runs his hand along the middle shelf, fingertips grazing the curve of a folded tunic, the cool lip of a jug, the spine of an old ledger bound in thin leather. Then, tucked between a basket of candle stubs and a stack of reed mats, he sees it. A small bundle, wrapped in white linen, square, no bigger than his palm. He pauses. The cloth is frayed at the edges, bound with a single loop of thread that has yellowed and thinned. He lifts it carefully and carries it to the light that filters through the slatted window. A soft ray catches the edge of the bundle, outlining it with gold. He sits slowly on the low stool by the wall, the bundle in his lap. It's heavier than it looks. You might picture him there, hands weathered, knees slightly apart, the cloth held as gently as one might cradle a bird. He does not rush. Instead, he unties the thread with care, unwinding it in soft spirals, letting it fall into his lap. Then, slowly, he unfolds the linen. Inside is a small Shabdi doll, carved from dark green faience, the glaze chipped in a few places, its features worn smooth by time and touch. But still, it is clearly a Shabdi. A servant figure meant to accompany the dead in the afterlife, to labor in the fields beyond, to stand in place when called. This one bears a faint carving of crossed arms, holding tiny farming tools. Its eyes are just indentations, its nose barely a ridge. But Amosi recognizes it instantly. It had been given to him when he was a boy, a gift from a traveling priest who had passed through their village during a flood year. His mother had cleaned the priest's tunic, fed him warm lentil stew, and the man had offered the doll as thanks. For the boy, he'd said, so he won't work alone in the field of reeds. Amosi had treasured it then, hidden it in a reed box beneath his bed, wrapped in scraps of dyed wool. Over the years, it became a companion of sorts, a talisman, not for luck, but for continuity. He hadn't seen it in decades. I thought you were gone, he murmurs. The Shabdi doesn't respond, of course, but he can feel something settle in the room, Not a spirit, not a presence. Just a memory, thick and gentle, like mist rising from the river at dawn. He turns the doll over in his hand. The glaze is cool even now. He traces the faint outline of the tools it holds: spade, hoe pick, and smiles. Tools of labor, yes, but also tools of growth. Asha appears at the doorway. Her voice is quiet. What's that? He lifts the doll slightly. A helper? Like a servant? Not exactly. She steps into the room, barefoot, careful, and crouches beside him. He places the doll in her hand. It goes with you, he says. When you die. She looks up at him, uncertain. To where? He shrugs. Wherever we go. She studies it. Will it know what to do? It always knows, he replies. Even if we forget. She holds the doll for a while longer, then places it gently back into his hands. It's small, she says. Yes, but it feels strong. He nods. That's the idea. You might picture them there, child and elder, sharing a moment shaped by old beliefs, not as superstition, but as comfort, as language, as a way to place meaning in things when meaning begins to drift. Amosi rewraps the doll in its linen, slowly, with reverence. He doesn't return it to the shelf. Instead, he sets it on the small table near the window, where the light will touch it each morning. It doesn't need to be hidden anymore. Some things are meant to be remembered, even when their purpose has faded. Asha leans her head against his arm. Will I have one too? She asks. He rests his hand on her hair. If you want one, he says, we'll make it together. And outside, the wind stirs the reed fence, and the light grows longer. The afternoon stretches onward, unhurried. The light softens again, and the warmth that once clung to the walls begins to recede into the earth. The house breathes quietly, its windows half-shaded by woven mats, its air thick with the mingling scents of old clay, faded incense, and drying herbs. Amosi has returned to the kitchen alcove, not to cook, not really, but to look. He opens the cupboard doors slowly. They do not creak, but they resist just slightly the way well-used wood sometimes does. Inside are a few clay pots, some baskets sealed with wax, and a row of small jars, their necks wrapped in linen to keep the dust out. He's not hungry, not in the way of appetite, but something draws him here, a quiet tug behind the ribs. The need for something sweet, not for the tongue but for the mind, for memory. On the second shelf, near the corner where the wall darkens from years of lamp smoke, he finds it, a jar of honey. Small, squat, sealed with a cork pressed tightly into its mouth. The rim is wrapped in cloth, tied with twine so dry it cracks slightly as he untwists it. The jar itself is cloudy, the glass imperfect, swirled with tiny bubbles trapped during its making. He carries it carefully to the table. The sunlight through the high window hits the jar just right, revealing the contents inside. Not liquid, not anymore. The honey has crystallized, thick, solid, slow, pale gold in color, flecked with faint bits of beeswax and perhaps a seed or two from seasons past. He smiles. This honey has waited. It has known stillness. It has become something else without losing itself. You might imagine him now, seated on a low stool at the table, the jar of honey before him, the air still around him, save for the occasional creak of the roof beam or the hush of a sparrow landing near the window. He does not open the jar immediately. He simply looks at it, as one might look at a familiar face after years apart, noting what has changed, what remains. He remembers the day he bought it. A market day, one of the last he attended with his wife. She had insisted on choosing the jar herself. Not the smooth ones, she said. The ones with ridges. The bees liked them better. He hadn't questioned it. She spoke often in riddles. It was part of her charm. She had carried it home in the fold of her robe, holding it close as though it were fragile, though it was not. They never opened it. Not that year. Not the next. It became one of those objects that waited for the right moment, the right occasion, and somehow that moment never quite arrived. And so it sat, on a shelf, a quiet guardian of sweetness, crystallizing with time. He removes the cork now, slowly, gently. It comes free with a soft pop, and the scent rises immediately. Not strong, but deep. A breath of wildflowers, of sun on dry grass, of the tiny lives of bees now long gone. He dips the tip of a reed spoon into it, presses against the surface, and watches as the crystal gives way, just slightly. He scoops a small portion, a rough, lumpy smear, and lifts it to his mouth. It melts eventually, not quickly, not like the honey of his youth, thin and golden, running in rivulets down flatbread or dripping from fig slices. This is slower, grainy at first, then smooth, then endless. Tastes of age, a patience, of seasons folded together. Asha appears in the doorway again, curious as always. "What are you eating?" she asks. "Honey." She crosses the room, climbs onto the stool beside him, and peers into the jar. It looks like stone. "It was once liquid. Did you forget about it?" "No," he says. "I just didn't need it. Until now." She dips her finger into the jar and licks it. Her face scrunches. "It's strange. You'll understand later. I like the new kind better." He chuckles. "Most people do." They sit together in silence for a while, the jar between them, the shadows lengthening around them. Asha eventually slides off the stool and returns to the outer room, humming softly under her breath, the way children do when the world feels quiet and good. Amosi remains. He dips the spoon again, not for hunger, not even for taste, just to feel something preserved, something untouched by time, yet shaped by it. The honey is thick, and slow, and soft, like memory, like grief, like love. He seals the jar once more, wraps the cloth around the mouth, and places it gently back on the shelf. There will be another day, perhaps one far off, when the jar will be found by someone else, someone younger, someone curious. And they, too, will taste the past and wonder who left it there. But for now, it waits again, and the house settles into evening once more. The sun drifts lower now, descending behind the far line of palms and rooftops, its last light slanting across the courtyard like the final brushstroke of a patient artist. The fig tree's shadow reaches long across the garden floor, touching the edge of the house wall, wrapping gently around the base of the bench. The quiet of evening takes a new shape, deeper, slower, heavier. It is not just the absence of noise. It is a settling, a drawing inward, a soft closing of the eyes before sleep. From where he sits near the window, Amosi can hear the river. Not loudly, not clearly, but he knows its voice, the subtle shift of current against stone, the occasional splash of a heron, the creak of a rope pulling tight on a moored boat. The river is always speaking, even when no one listens. He rises carefully, dusts off the hem of his robe, and steps into the hallway. The lamp by the entrance flickers gently, throwing warm shadows against the wall where Asha's painted henna still stains the plaster. He passes it without touching, like one passes a sleeping cat, with respect and silence. Outside, the air is cooler now. It tastes of dusk and dust and faint sweetness from the fig tree. The path to the river is worn but still firm beneath his feet, pressed flat by years of steps. Not just his own, but his children's and theirs and those who came before. Paths remember, even when people forget. At the bend where the palms begin to thin, he sees her, the woman who counts the boats. She stands as she always does, tall, silent, hands clasped before her, eyes on the water. Her hair is silver, braided into a long rope that falls between her shoulders. Her robe is simple, sun-bleached to the color of sandstone. She does not wear jewelry. Her presence is enough. Amosi does not call to her. He never has. Their acquaintance is built not on conversation, but on coexistence. On the mutual understanding that silence, too, is a form of companionship. He steps beside her and nods. She nods back. Together, they look out over the river. The last ferry of the day glides past. A long, low vessel with 2 oarsmen, one at each end. The lantern at its prow glows faintly, like a firefly caught in a jar. A single passenger sits hunched beneath a reed mat, arms folded against the chill. "One," she says quietly. Amosi glances at her. She does not look back. Her eyes remain on the river. "How many today?" he asks, though he already knows the answer is not just in numbers. "7," she replies. "But only 2 were full." He nods. She has done this for as long as he can remember. Each evening, as the light fades, she comes to the water and watches. Counts. Notes, perhaps not aloud, the shape of each boat, the way it moves, who sits in it, how deep it rides in the water. She remembers things others forget. Which oars creak, which passengers fidget, which boats return emptier than they left. Some say she once waited for someone. A husband, a son, a sister. No one is quite sure. But she never explains. She simply watches. Amosi used to wonder what she was hoping to see. Now he thinks it's not about waiting or hope or even remembrance. It's about rhythm. The boats arrive. The boats depart. They rock gently in the current. They glide through dusk like thoughts passing across a tired mind. "Do you still count them?" he asks. She nods. "Even though you know the patterns?" "They change." He smiles. "But the river stays the same." "The river forgets," she says. "That's why I remember." You might picture the 2 of them there. A man and a woman shaped by time, both standing still as the river moves slowly before them. The sky above them deepens from gold to lavender to indigo. A single star appears, then 2. He shifts his weight, leans slightly on his cane. "Do you ever write them down?" he asks. "No," she replies. "Some things live better in the head." They stand for a while longer, watching as another small vessel drifts by, too far to count properly. No lantern, just the vague outline of movement. 8, she says. "Maybe 7.5, he replies. She chuckles softly, a rare sound, gentle like reeds parting for a fish. When the stars grow thicker and the path home begins to blur in shadow, Amosi turns to go. She does not follow. She never does. She will stand a while longer until the last boat passes, or until the dark makes them all the same. As he walks back, the wind picks up slightly. The scent of the river follows him, cool, rich, filled with quiet weight. He does not count the boats, but he is grateful someone does. That night, sleep does not come immediately. Amosi lies on his mat, his hands folded over his chest, eyes open to the darkness above. The ceiling beams are barely visible now, but he knows each one by heart. Their lines, their notches, the faint crack where one split during a storm years ago and was braced with a wedge of cedar. The coolness of night has settled over the house like a linen sheet, and with it comes the stillness that presses thoughts to the surface. His breath is slow. His chest rises and falls as gently as the reeds beside the river. He does not fear sleep, but sometimes on nights like this, he feels it hesitate, like a bird deciding whether or not to land. And so he waits, patiently, knowing it will come. When it does, it brings dreams. Not the vivid, strange dreams of youth, where people speak in riddles and places transform, but the slower kind. The kind that feels like remembering, as though the dream does not invent, but simply reveals what was always there, behind the wall of waking. In the dream, it is late spring, or perhaps early summer. The line between them is unclear. The air is warm and damp, the kind that clings to your skin like a second robe. He is standing in the old market square, the one that used to sit near the southern docks before it was moved closer to the Temple Road. Stalls are draped in faded linen, weighed down by baskets of melons, squash, dried lentils. The smell of crushed coriander and spilled beer mingles with the smoke from the fish fires. The colors are muted, but alive: ochre, brown, gray-green, brick red. People pass him by, but none speak. Their faces are soft, indistinct, like shadows in water. He walks slowly, his sandals slapping the stone with a rhythm too regular to be conscious. He is looking for something, or someone. Then he sees it, a fig tree in bloom, which is wrong. He stops. The tree is full, impossibly full, its branches heavy with fruit. But the season is wrong. The air is too wet, the moon too low. The fig shouldn't be blooming. Not yet, not now. And he feels it then. Not fear, not confusion, but a deep, unspoken longing, as though he stepped into a moment that should have happened, but never did. You might imagine him, standing in that dream square, beneath a tree that glows too brightly against a sky too pale. The fruit above him so close, yet never quite within reach. A branch sways, a fig falls. He reaches to catch it, and wakes. The room is dark, the silence complete. No wind, no footsteps, no creaking wood. Only the soft sound of breathing. Not his own, but Asha's, from the room beside his. She is safe. That thought grounds him. He sits up slowly, not all the way, just enough to feel the earth beneath him, to let the cool air pass over his shoulders. Dreams, he thinks, are strange visitors. They come without knocking, say what they wish, then vanish before you can answer. And some dreams are not dreams at all. Some are seasons that never came. He remembers a year, decades ago, when the rains never arrived. The planting was done, the soil turned, the offerings placed before the temple steps. And then, nothing. Dryness. Waiting. Hope held like breath, long past the point of comfort. People stared at the sky with eyes full of dust. The oxen grew thin, the granaries quiet, and still they waited. The rains came the following year, as if nothing had been missed. But he remembers the one that didn't. Sometimes, dreams carry the scent of that year, dry earth, false blossom, questions left in the sky. He lies back down and exhales slowly. Not everything has a season. Not every blossom arrives. But memory, like the river, continues. It moves even when nothing grows. He closes his eyes once more, letting the dream slip back where it came from. And somewhere outside, beneath the fig tree, a leaf falls. Morning arrives again, soft as breath. The sky is pale with early light. The air smells of cooled clay and distant smoke. Birds begin their tentative calls, not yet singing in full voice, but offering small, uncertain notes to see if the world is listening. The fig tree rustles faintly, as if shaking off the weight of dreams. And somewhere beyond the wall, a rooster offers a single, questioning crow. Amosi is already awake. He did not rise quickly. He rarely does these days, but his eyes opened just before the sky began to shift. He lies still for a while longer, listening, letting his body remember itself. Then, with familiar care, he sits up, wraps his shawl around his shoulders, and makes his way to the courtyard. The earth is still cool under his feet. Asha is not yet stirring. Her room remains silent. He leaves her to sleep. The morning is his alone, for now. He prepares tea the same way he has for years. A small pinch of dried mint, a splash of aniseed, a few crushed petals from the desert hibiscus that grows near the back wall. The water heats slowly over the coals, releasing steam into the air like a sigh. As he waits, he hears footsteps approaching. Not hurried, measured.
A familiar guide.
He turns slightly and sees him, old Biket, the temple priest. Once tall and proud, Biket now walks with a curved staff, his steps guided more by rhythm than by sight. His robe is clean but worn thin at the hems, and his hair, once dark, is now almost entirely white, save for one stubborn streak of black at the temple. Amosi gestures toward the bench. There's tea. Biket nods, lowering himself carefully onto the seat. Smells like memory, he says. Isn't that all anything smells like these days? They share the tea in silence for a while. The warmth soaks into their hands, their fingers curved around the bowls as though holding small suns. The steam curls upward, slow and fragrant. Finally, Biket speaks. Did I ever tell you the story of the star that refused to die? Amosi smiles faintly. You've told me many stories. Then you'll forgive one more. Amosi nods. Biket leans forward slightly, his eyes clouded but intent. Long ago, he begins. When the gods were still forming the sky, each star was given its name and its time. Most accepted their place. They rose, they shone, they faded, and were born again. But one star, just one, resisted. He pauses to sip the tea. It burned too brightly. It refused to dim, even when the others whispered to it, telling it that everything must sleep, that everything must change. It clung to its light, stubborn, proud, afraid. And what happened to it? Amosi asks. Biket tilts his head. The gods sent it dreams, he says. Night after night, visions of warmth, of rest, of floating in a sky with no weight. The star, still afraid, resisted. But the dreams were patient, soft. They came not with commands, but with comfort. And slowly, the star began to flicker. Amosi watches the steam rise from his bowl. And then, Biket smiles. One morning it was gone. Not with a bang, not with fire, just gone, like a breath taken in. And above where it once burned, the sky was more beautiful. Because now there was space for something new. They sit with that thought for a while. The tea cools. The sun lifts its face above the palm trees. You might picture them there. Two elders shaped by time and ritual. Their robes catching the early light. Their words drifting like ash across still water. The fig tree above offers a single creak, one of its branches shifting as if in approval. Were we the star? Amosi asks at last. Biket shrugs. Maybe. Or maybe we're just the ones who remember it. He stands slowly, leaning on his staff. I won't be far. You never are. Biket leaves without another word, his steps soft against the path. Amosi finishes the last of the tea. The breeze returns. The star is gone now, yes, but the story remains. By midday, the village hums again, faintly, gently, a low murmur of life, the occasional sound of a clay pot being set down, a palm broom sweeping in a courtyard, a child laughing somewhere near the granaries. But the river is still. Amosi notices it first from the courtyard. A sense, not a sound. He is watering the herbs again, more out of habit than need. The leaves have already turned their faces toward the sun, satisfied. But his hands crave the motion, his body the repetition, the act of care. Then he pauses.
No splashing. No ares troques.
No chattering from the ferrymen across the bend. No creaking of ropes. Just silence. He walks slowly to the edge of the garden, then along the outer path to the overlook where the palms part and the river can be seen more clearly. A few neighbors are there already, standing still, eyes narrowed. Asha appears behind him, her steps light, curious. Why is it so quiet? He doesn't answer right away. The Nile is calm, unusually so. The surface is smooth, almost glass-like. Not motionless, but stilled in a way that feels unnatural. No current pulling visibly downstream, no reeds bending, no debris floating. Even the birds seem unsure of what to make of it. A heron stands perfectly still in the shallows, neck half-tucked. Someone whispers, "Is it resting?" Someone else says, "I've never seen it like this." Amosi nods. He has, once. He remembers the last time the Nile fell silent. Years ago, when a sandbar near the northern bend collapsed, redirecting a branch of the river. For 2 days, the water had seemed confused. It didn't know where to go, or so it seemed. In truth, it was simply changing its mind, as all rivers eventually do. But this silence feels different. Not sudden, not loud, just present, like a held breath. You might picture him standing there, beneath the full sun, eyes on the motionless water, Asha at his side holding a fig leaf like a fan, her hand wrapped around his. The path is dusty. The reeds sway in slow arcs, and in the midst of it all, the great river pauses. A boat floats near the opposite bank, untethered, drifting almost without movement. The figure inside it sits quietly, not rowing, not panicking, simply letting the boat ride where it will. Asha tugs on his hand. Is something wrong? No, he says softly. The river is thinking. She frowns, uncertain. Rivers can think? Yes, but only when no one's looking. She smiles faintly, and they watch together as a single ripple breaks the surface. A fish, perhaps, or a breeze beginning again. The silence is not frightening. It is full, heavy with meaning. It presses gently against the ears, like the inside of a temple just before the first chant. The others begin to disperse, returning to their homes. Not worried, just puzzled. Even the elders have no explanation. Some suggest it is a sign, others, a blessing. But no one offers more than a murmur. Amosi and Asha remain for a while longer. Then slowly they turn to go. Back in the courtyard, everything is as it was. The fig tree leans gently. The herbs sway in the same quiet rhythm. But Amosi feels something has shifted. Not in the river, in him. As if the silence had opened a window in his chest. That evening the breeze returns. So does the sound of the water, faint at first, then steady. The river has remembered its path. Or perhaps it has chosen a new one. No one speaks of it again. Not directly, but for days afterward, Amosi finds himself pausing mid-step, listening for that quiet, wondering if it will return, hoping perhaps that it does. Because in that moment, when the Nile ran quiet, he remembered what it was like to listen to the world before words, before stories, before names, just breath, just water, just silence. The afternoon has grown long again, casting deep shadows along the courtyard wall. The heat is not harsh, but steady, the kind that seeps into the bricks and rises slowly, making the air ripple in places like shallow water stirred by a gentle hand. Amosi has returned to his bench, though this time he does not tend the herbs or reach for tools. He has already moved through his small rituals, watered the roots, brushed the dust from the steps, swept a handful of dry leaves into a corner. There is nothing more the day asks of him, and so he rests. He does not intend to sleep, not at first. He simply slides the cushion into the narrow band of shade that hugs the house wall and lowers himself onto it, careful of his knees, mindful of the soft pop in his hip as he turns. The ground is cool here, the bricks retaining the chill of night longer than the open floor. He leans back against the wall and closes his eyes. The light filters through the fig leaves above, not directly, but in shifting, patterned glimmers. It paints his face with shadows that move as the branches sway. His breath slows. The sounds around him soften into a distant hum. There is the rustle of a bird adjusting its perch, the hollow plunk of a date falling into the dust, a faint murmuring from the neighbor's courtyard, pots clinking, a laugh, a lullaby half-sung. You might imagine him there, his shoulders pressed into the wall's cool clay, hands resting loosely on his stomach, one sandal half removed, the other dangling slightly from his heel, his eyes closed, his face slack with the softness of afternoon sleep. This nap is not like night sleep. It is shallower, more porous. Dreams come in small pieces, fragments of voices, images of water, the sensation of fingers tracing lines in flour. Time folds. Sounds stretch. The breeze shifts and he stirs. Asha tiptoes into the courtyard at some point, sees him sleeping, and pauses. She considers waking him, then doesn't. Instead, she retrieves a small reed mat and places it beside him, curling up beneath the lower leaves of the fig tree. She lies on her side, watching his chest rise and fall. She mimics the rhythm without realizing it, her own breath sinking to his, her small fingers tracing invisible lines on the ground. The courtyard grows quiet around them. Not silent, not empty, just peaceful. Even the insects, it seems, slow their song. Amosi dreams lightly. In the dream, he is young again, but not entirely. His limbs move more easily. His robe is uncreased, and the sun does not tire him. He walks through a narrow market, and everyone he passes nods. Not out of recognition, but as if they've been waiting. A woman hands him a fig without asking. A man offers him a jug of water. He accepts both and sits on a step shaded by a cloth canopy. There, across from him, a boy is drawing in the dust with a stick. Circles, then spirals, then names. The boy looks up, and for a moment he cannot tell if it is Asha or himself. The face is both familiar and strange, child and memory. And then the fig in his hand splits open, not from rot, but from ripeness, and a honeyed scent rises so vivid he wakes with it still in his nose. He opens his eyes slowly. The sun has shifted again. The shade now stretches further across the courtyard. The wall behind him is warm, the bricks gently pressing their heat into his back like the hand of an old friend. Beside him, Asha sleeps, her mouth slightly open, one braid curled over her cheek. She has clutched a handful of fig leaves in her sleep, and their edges brush gently against her arm with each breath. He doesn't move. The nap has left him neither fully rested nor entirely awake. But it has given him something else, a pause, a thread of quiet between the beats of the day. He watches the clouds shift above, pale against the deepening blue of the afternoon sky. The breeze returns, the fig tree creaks, and Amosi, sitting in the shade of the house wall, exhales with the slow satisfaction of one who has nothing left to prove. The sun begins its slow descent, tilting westward behind the palms. Shadows lengthen across the courtyard, climbing the walls inch by inch like water returning to a well. The fig tree, generous and ever watching, leans further into the waning light, its branches heavy, its roots still and deep. Amosi has risen from his nap and sits now on the small step leading from the inner house to the courtyard. This step, worn smooth by decades of feet, his wife's, his children's, Asha's, has become his place of pause. Neither inside nor out, just between. He rests his elbows on his knees and lets his gaze wander. Asha is drawing again, this time with a piece of charcoal on a flat shard of pottery. She hums softly, the tune he once taught her, the one he half remembers from a festival long ago. Her fingers smudge black lines into soft images. A boat, a sun, a tall figure with arms outstretched. The house is quiet. So is the street beyond the wall. Even the merchants have closed their awnings for the day, the linen strips tied back, the dust swept once and left to settle. A breeze picks up, light but persistent, and Amosi feels the dry whisper of sand brushing against his ankles. It gathers in small eddies, curling around the base of the fig tree, dancing across the flat stones, and finally up toward the step where he sits. He does not move. He watches as the grains edge closer, one by one, caught in the folds of wind. They collect in the worn corner of the step, the same place where he once spilled tea, once dropped a ring, once knelt to tie a sandal. The sand knows no urgency. It arrives when it arrives. Slowly, gently, without fanfare. He thinks of all the things the sand has covered. He remembers a path he used to take as a boy, through the eastern fields, past a wall of stacked bricks, now gone. Nothing remains but the faint line of dust and the stories that cling to it. He remembers the footprint his daughter left when she first learned to walk, how he watched it slowly vanish under the hush of a morning wind. He remembers the letters he wrote but never sent, buried beneath scrolls in a clay jar, the ink fading even before the papyrus cracked. The sand does not forget, he thinks. It simply covers. Asha looks up. Grandfather. He smiles. Yes, my bird. Why does the wind always come before dinner? He tilts his head. Because the wind likes to taste the smell before anyone else does. She grins, returns to her drawing. Inside, a pot simmers lentils with garlic and onions. The smell threads through the air like incense, rich but familiar. Asha's mother has begun to hum, too. A different song this time, soft and low. Amosi's hand rests on the stone beside him, fingers splayed against its warmth. He feels the faint scratch of sand beneath his nails, a gentle roughness against his skin. The breeze lifts again, and a small swirl gathers by the step, spilling a fine dust across its edge. He watches it settle into the grooves, the cracks worn by decades, the small chip where his grandson once dropped a jug. And then, without ceremony, the sand begins to cover the step. Just a little, just enough. He does not brush it away. Instead, he lets it rest, lets it find its place. You might imagine him there, still and slow, as the sun reaches the far edge of the courtyard and spills its last light across the walls. The sky is tinged with soft pink and quiet gold. The day is ending. Not with words, not with a closing, but with the gentle hush of sand over stone, of breath beneath breeze, of memory settling into silence. He closes his eyes, not in sleep, not yet, just to listen, to the sound of a world exhaling. And the sand covers the step,